Good morning and welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. Tommy may or may not be with us this
I'm
morning.
still here. Which
Okay.
is
The
strange.
video's frozen. Okay, just checking. Just making sure.
Well,
This
may go with the story.
This may go with your story.
Before you get into your story, it is a happy Tuesday, gentlemen, and don't you forget it, regardless of whatever trials and tribulations you've been through, Tommy.
There we go.
Hey, here we go. Okay.
There we go.
Okay. Goodness me. Hi, guys.
Our main topic for today is, before we go into our news and intro pieces, main topic today is an article from Nightingale Dev. Nightingale? Right?
Mm-hmm.
DVs? Yeah, Nightingale DVs, sorry. I'm trying to read the URL here correctly. And it's a data exploration spin-off projects. So we've all been doing data projects before. How do you focus your attention onto the main project? And then how do you, let's put that in the parking lot. Let's hang on to these ideas for later so we can come back and do other data projects. Let's do that in phase 2. And it'll be interesting also to see how you guys approach. Does anything actually happen in phase 2? You write down all these other ideas that can get pushed off, and we'll talk about that later. So anyways,
interesting comment.
It'll be, I think, a good conversation. This is a neat article. Really like it. Very thought-provoking as well. Okay, with that, Tommy, your computer, for those of you who are joining live on the internet, Tommy's having some, glitching on the screen here for his video, but apparently this was a much bigger issue on your Friday.
Yeah, this is not Tommy testing out a new camera like we have in the past. Let's cut back.
Which didn't go so well.
Which did not go well. The experiment was a failure, unfortunately.
Failure.
Let's cut to Friday around 11:30. Me and Mike are going to be doing planning for some more Learn Fabric in a few hours. That's fine. Computer starts flickering and gives me a green screen error, which I've never seen before.
I've never seen a green screen error.
Yeah. So it's like, okay. And then I reload the computer. I do the check disk, scan disk. Everything's fine. Another 25 minutes go by, another error. And I get this new error 32, WHEA, uncorrectable error. I'm like,
stellar error messages, Microsoft. Thank you very much.
Which out of all the error messages you want to get, uncorrectable is not one of them.
Correct. Yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, maybe I have to do a restore point. So I try to reload again, and it's starting to load BIOS. And it doesn't even go to Windows anymore. My computer keeps resetting. It says the BIOS loading screen. I have an ASUS motherboard. And it keeps going that, resets, and keeps going back to that. And I get this blue screen saying, can't load Windows.
Oh, no.
And not even like a recovery mode. Like you've seen the recovery mode where you can like go to command prompt to do other things. I can't even get to a Windows screen. It was BIOS telling me that we couldn't load Windows. I haven't really done anything like besides the normal computer stuff, so to speak. And I was like, okay. So start doing some research. Mike is messaging me like, hey, are we meeting? I didn't message him back because I'm like, not today, my friend, because I am now beginning to realize after some research, it's something to do with the hardware. It's some So I have to check fans. I have to check.
My initial thought is like the hard drive went. That's what I'm thinking. But I think when it won't get past the BIOS and it can't load anything from Windows, I feel like that's when the hard drive just toasts itself.
Yeah. So it could be either something blew out.
Can we pause here? You said something that strikes me. Are you one of those guys? So you read the message where somebody was like, "Are we meeting today?"
And he was like,
"Have a planned schedule." Did you respond not today, or was it just radio silence?
Nope.
So you're a guy that reads the stuff, and you're just like, "I'm not going to communicate," because I've got a friend like that, and I cannot tell you how absolutely challenging that is for me to accept.
And I don't know if that friend's me, but let's go first.
Nope. Talking about a different one.
Sorry, Seth. I didn't mean to do that to you.
Nope. Not you either. Not on this podcast.
Okay.
Just saying.
Calling out someone else.
Noted, Tommy. I am now putting you in a bucket of.
That's fine. And you can put me in that bucket when I'm taking out my graphics card, my NVIDIA 470. I'm in that bucket.
Okay. All right.
When I'm cursing, going,
sorry.
Shoot.
You're having personal difficulties, and we're dealing with those right now. So let's focus back in on
let's
The
go back.
BIOS hardware.
Yes.
Sorry.
And I
Yes,
will
sir.
say, and I'll put myself in the bucket as an independent consultant when the one way of working is gone. Yeah, I'm in that bucket. Totally. Absolutely.
This is, but you don't. I mean, to be clear here, Tommy, you have extra computers. So, like, when one goes down, there's a plethora of other devices that
There
could
are other
potentially be
devices.
used. And this is the excuse that I've used. Well, if my main computer goes down, I need to have a second and a third
Secondary.
just in
Backup.
case. So that's why I have a
Right.
Surface Book and another Surface Book and another computer. Like I've got so many computers. Like we could have like 6 go down and I'm still able to work. Like it's not that big a deal.
This is true, but yeah. So basically, it was 2 in the morning, and I'm taking out.
We're working on this from 11 a.m. till 2 in the morning.
So because I was doing research, and then I basically was putting
So
in
you were
hard drives.
were
to
you
do
ripping apart
diagnostic
the
tests.
entire computer?
Motherboard, because basically from the research you could do diagnostic tests. So I had like extra SSD drives that I would plug in that had an application on it that would run to say, is it the graphics drive? Is it the fan? Is it too hot? So because before I went to Best Buy. So basically we finally kept doing some more tests. I plugged in a Microsoft drive to try to load it from a different hard drive. It kind of worked, but it was still bugging out. Finally, we're on a completely new computer. It's like more than factory reset, so to speak, where right now it looks like it's working. We've done some stress tests on the computer. I'll tell you what, though, throughout this whole thing, one thing I've learned, it's really fun building a computer. I didn't know this, but all hard drives or all motherboards have those batteries, like those little circle batteries that you want to change out. You want to change it out every 6 years because that can also be one of the problems.
Interesting.
So that's what I did. I ordered one of those batteries. I had to take out the
No
graphics card.
stinking away.
Yeah. And ever since then, it's been working totally fine. So if that battery dies, BIOS won't load, or BIOS can't tell the time, which is really integral for BIOS.
So the fundamental problem here of the computer saying you're broke, I'm broken,
right,
was a battery on the motherboard.
The battery on the motherboard, which you would never know it's there unless you took out the graphics card or the graphics drive.
I can't tell you the last time I've replaced any battery on any motherboard at any point in time. Like I've had a couple desktops. I've never touched it.
What's the longevity you said though, Tommy? Like 6 years?
They said anywhere from 6 to 8 years. And that's
how long are you holding on to a 6 to 8 year old computer though, Mike?
I don't know. The big behemoth that I'm running off of right now has been around here for like 5 years now. I mean, I bought an expensive one starting out, and it's a beast. But I was like, I'm gonna buy this thing. This thing's gonna run forever. It's done well, but I don't. Yeah, I've never.
Clean your fans. If you have fans on your motherboard or on your computer, clean your fans.
Interesting.
These are all huge things. Anyways, so far we're so good. There's a ton of more configuration I have to do. But all of my environment variables, I have to install Python. I have to install Power BI, and all the extra things. It's fine. It's fine.
It's good. You need a clean reset. Now it's clean.
It feels
now it should run well.
Yeah.
I have my own hypothesis.
What?
I think it was too much coffee. You spilled espresso in it. That's what. That's what made it.
I mean that is
it's
one.
Always a good hypothesis.
Right? But I think the AI was trying to get out of your computer, Tommy.
Oh no!
It was sucking up all the battery, all the juice that it could in trying to make a play for full internet access. That's
no. Oh no, my model.
All those large language models are toasted. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe it was just trying to find all of the extra juice it could pull, and it was like, oh look, battery.
I'll eat that.
Isn't your computer like brand new?
No, this
you were putting new hardware bits into it.
Yes.
Yeah. See, this I've learned from working on old cars, man. You start swapping out the old for the new, and a whole slew of other problems can come up on the older stuff all the time.
This is also interesting to me. It also feels a little bit more like your large language models were getting jealous of Copilot, maybe per se, a little bit, and so they were like fighting wars and things on. You didn't even know it was happening.
I'll show you. I'll give you an error you've never seen before.
We're gonna make up one. Yeah,
that's hilarious,
man. So you just got back up and running yesterday?
Basically yesterday we finally had like all systems go after some like I said, I did some I wasn't about to install everything and then get the error again. So I did stress test to basically like test everything to the limit to see if anything would break, which are actually a thing. And so far we're good. Like I said, it looks like the camera's doing pretty good now. It's the first time I really loaded the camera. So
all right. Well, you have a fire extinguisher nearby, right? Just in case.
Yeah.
Just in case.
I just need 2 fans in here at all times.
Yep, exactly right.
I'm happy more than ever. I'm happy to see you guys.
Yeah. My weekend was so much better than yours. Like I sat on the sideline and watched my kid play soccer in a tournament all weekend long.
Nice. What place did you guys get? If it was a tournament?
Yeah, they got into the championship game and lost.
That's excellent. Very nice.
Yeah.
That's exciting. We had a very different experience with a lot of our soccer experiences where we continued to lose everything all the time. And it was very disheartening. I had to stop like caring at some point. I was like, this is horrible. It's nice to win a little bit though.
Well, I'm glad to see that I now have sports dads here. We can say that for another episode.
That's probably a whole nother episode.
We've just started that. And I have to ask you so many questions for veterans in the game.
Oh man. Yeah. That's another episode.
Tommy, you're going to need to not yell at other children.
Yeah.
You just
parents can get penalized. Tommy.
Yeah, parents can get thrown out. So you know lessons from seasoned dads in this. Don't like yell at other kids.
There's like another chemical releases as soon as you see your kid playing a sport, like in a game, like some endorphin where I'm just like, I've never experienced before.
It's like raw emotion that's like easy to like well up. You're like, don't do that. Do this. Run faster.
How many times have I told you? Yeah.
I know you can do it. Like I've seen you do it. Like, come on. Yeah. And you want to win. But you can't act like a fool. All right.
Well, I'm glad your weekend was great, Seth. Mike, I'm happy your weekend was more fun. I think you had something that was actually
with a working computer. I actually had something come up that was just kind of a bit of a struggle. So I don't know how much you guys have worked with the connection. So there's a new connection manager. So inside, when you create like a pipeline, or if you create like a new, actually particularly my issue was in pipelines. So if you create a pipeline, you can create a connection, and that connection is then managed in like the admin. It's like an admin center. It's like there's connections and gateways. I think inside the menu, it's like to click the gear and then get down to the menu. But what I found was very interesting. When you create a connection and you try to edit a pipeline or go look at it, you'll get this nice message. If you're not the owner of the connection, you'll get a message that says, "Hey, you're not the owner." Okay. It says, "Please contact the owner." All right. And let them know you need access to the connection. Great. Nice message. It's kind of clear. Nowhere does it say who the owner is. Nowhere is there a link to go message them and say, "Hey, I need access." Nowhere. There's nothing about it. I would say, okay, no problem. I'm the admin. I'm going to go into the admin portal and go see where the connection is because I'm the admin of the whole Power BI tenant. Yeah. So I go over to the admin portal. I go into the connections and settings. I'm scrolling down. I'm like, okay, not seeing any buttons here that tells me like see all connections across the organization. Trying to find it, looking, can't find it. I only see connections that I've made or people have shared with me. Not a big deal. It makes sense. I have found you are not allowed, as an admin, you are not allowed to see all connections in your tenant. And if there is a connection that is not owned by you, you can't API your way into it. You can't take over it. You can't even find it. I don't have a clue where you go find missing connections inside Power BI portal. Now, again, I also understand like there is potentially a security risk of like an admin or someone being able to like move connections between different people. I understand that. That's probably not advisable. But if you're the admin of the tenant, I should be able to see all connections in my tenant, no matter where they are, and I should be able to push permissions to different people on those connections. So what I'm seeing here is if I have a pipeline and someone makes a connection in that pipeline to a data source, whatever, and they leave the company or they get promoted or they go somewhere else,
that's just
done.
Wow.
It's gone. That connection cannot be recovered. There is no way for you to go get it. You have to log in as that person and go get the connection, get it shared with you before they leave. To me, this is a huge miss.
I would throw that in your back channels immediately for a resolution,
I
because
have
there's no way
I have already.
Okay, good.
I wrote a really long blog. I wrote a really long like message like, hey, I'm seeing this and this and this. This doesn't make sense to me, because the same thing happens like in like the personal workspaces, right? But now we have the ability to go like control those a little bit more. So as an admin,
happen.
Yeah, it used to happen. Like you can fix that now.
You're the admin.
Yeah,
admin privilege, or Uber admin. If we need an Uber admin in the Fabric, whatever, then do it. But yeah, some one person or group absolutely needs visibility into everything that is going on in the organization.
That's what I'm saying. Okay, just making sure you're feeling the same thing that I am about this.
Oh yeah, man. The more you're talking, and my blood pressure was rising.
This is the Wild West that I had my first role as a data analyst. We were from the data sets. Yeah. And this, I'm glad that you're already on top of it. Please keep us updated.
I'll let you know if anything changes. But right now, like, I haven't heard, there's no API. There's no way you can go access these things. I'm even just, I mean, at one level, I'm just trying to figure out where the heck do I find like a list of all the connections? I don't even know in the API stuff, like, unless you're going through and like running a scanner API and like seeing all the different data sets from the tenant, maybe then you'll see everything. But then I don't know how I get access to it. I don't know how. There's no API to add my access to any of these things. It's just, seeing really big mess.
Worst case scenario. It's at least the connection name and the owner.
Correct. Right? And that's okay. So one more thing. I'll add another color to this one. Right. I'm in the pipeline. I'm looking at the connection, and it says you don't have access. Like, okay, cool. Let me go look at the name of the connection so I can go talk to someone about it or whatever. No name, just a GUID. And when the person who does have access logs in, they can see the actual name of the connection. I'm like, again, I understand this potentially could be a safety risk, but on the other hand, I'm thinking I need to at least see the name of the connection. But I think I know why they're doing this, because the names of connections can potentially be just the URL of where the connection's going to. So you basically see the location.
Path to request access?
No, it says you should request access, but I don't know. There's no link to it. There's no,
which also is like a false flag, and you know this because, right, like, if something's buried in somebody's personal SharePoint, request access, like, that does nothing. It goes nowhere, right?
Correct.
So, like, even that I don't like.
Yes, not a big fan.
And that's hopefully they fix that. That's
data flows. You could see the owner if you.
Well, and I mean, in data flows Gen 1 and other things, right? You could have a semantic model, and at least I could take over that thing, right? So maybe I couldn't edit it, or maybe I can't see it because it was owned by somebody else. That's fine. Just let me take over. Or what it should be is that, what I think the experience should be is a connection shows up you don't have access to, and it should recognize you are an admin, and you should be able to say add to connection. You should literally, as an admin, I should be able to add myself to any connection anywhere I want in my tenant, in my organization, and you can't do that. So if chat has found this out, or chat has any struggles with this, I would be curious if chat has seen this or have any struggles with this. If anyone else has seen what I'm seeing, or maybe this is just so new that people aren't really. I said in my message, I was like, give it like 2 months, and I guarantee you this is going to be a hot issue for someone to deal with inside Microsoft, because it's going to just take a little bit of time for people to build some of these things and move on. And when those people move on, you're going to have a whole bunch of missing, broken, can't connect to things that people are going to stop using. So like that.
Is this the thing that's also in GA? I know Fabric's all generally available, but the feature that you're doing, is this considered GA?
I don't think connections is GA. I mean, sorry, let me say that again. I think the ability to make connections is GA. I mean, it's very pivotal with what's going on in Fabric. I mean, you can't make any connection to a pipeline without making some sort of connection. And you can't make a connection, like, you have to do it no matter what. But the creator of it is basically the one who owns it. There's and my biggest gripe here is the admins can't get access to it or push it around. It's visibility.
Yeah.
Anyways, so throwing that out there into the ether, let's see who else can figure something out here. Maybe there's a solution that I haven't seen yet. I'd love to hear your solutions if you've encountered this, and I'd love to hear if you've solved it and how to find connection strings. So if you in chat, for those who are listening afterwards, send me a message. Let me know what you found, if there's a way to solve this problem. Anyways, all that to say, we've burned through a perfectly good amount of introductions. Now let's move into our main topic. So I'll paste the actual link to the article here in the chat window as well. Tom, you want to give us a quick little overview of the Nightingale article, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so we're really loving the articles from the Nightingale website, which is really all about data visualization. And the article we're looking at here is actually in a part or a series. We're looking at the 8th post in the series. And it's really talking about looking at new projects and even masters, people who've been experts in our fields for a long time face learning challenges. So how can we, even on current projects or projects that we have to do, spend time to actually spin off on projects to learn, spin off for projects that where we don't want to do our own research and development, maybe something more creative, maybe something just because we're interested in it. And I think for us today, it's how do we balance that time that can lead to valuable insights, spin off projects off the norm, off the things we're supposed to do? How can those spin-off projects actually lead to valuable insights for either the people doing it or the business? And how do we encourage that in an organization?
So there's a really good diagram very early, and there's a lot of words and conversation happening in this article, but there's a great diagram that I think explains a lot of my experiences when I'm working on projects. There is on the y-axis of the diagram, it says the size of project. So and it's interesting because it's almost like a a diagram that is it's a bit, the y-axis is not a typical y-axis. It doesn't start from 0, goes and go to a number. It's just basically a general size, right? So the larger the y-axis in the visual, the larger the size of the project. And so then you have a couple key points on the chart that I think are very worthwhile touching on here is you risk the max risk of overwhelming yourself, the max risk of exhaustion, and then it talks about wherever you go from idea all the way down to delivery and deployment. So I think this is a great diagram, and I feel like this is a lot of what I go through when I work on projects, either with customers or my own projects internally.
It should feel like a great diagram because we were extremely excited about it when we talked about an earlier article in the series in episode 214.
Yeah, exactly.
So it is from the same author, Erica Gunn, and a little bit further downstream. I think we were talking a while ago about her like 6. So this is 8. But yeah, the idea of the spin-off project off the main, right, and that expansion and ideation, right, to get to the main project. We're getting down to the focus and consolidation where you have to, like, what are the core bits and pieces that, whether it, there's time bound, there's capacity, there's what do we need to deliver, and then but as you've gone through all of this ideation to build, like, what can we do, what's going to make the biggest impact, or make the biggest impact. There are so many other great ideas that could be implemented, right, that you have to cut out. And I think what this article leans into a little bit is how do you stay focused on the deliverable of the main project, but at the same time take some of these other ideas and create spin-off projects from them. And we'll get into like the delivery and like what exactly these are, I think, in the conversations. But holistically, I think the key points that she outlines to ensure that it's a successful spin-off, right, is that there's clear boundaries between the two projects.
Or
they
more.
They have common goals and mutual wins. Work align the timelines in advance as far as like the spin-off and the main, and then be realistic about what you can take on.
So what would be? I'm thinking about how to materialize this kind of. It's conceptual at this point. I like kind of practical examples of where you might see this occurring. So do you have any examples? Either this is a question for both Tommy and Seth. Do you have any examples of where you've seen a project start and you were delivering something, an output of a report? It's a build a lake house. It's something but then you saw there were some side spin-off projects that kind of came along for the ride, and you were able to absorb them, bring them either into the main project line to get them completed, or you said, nah, it's time to wait. We'll just put those off on the side and we'll wait to phase 2 to see those being done. Any examples you have that would do this?
A little different than the way you actually defined it, whether the spin-off projects came from the outside. But a really good example in my own career was we were working on a report for product lifecycle, and from the idea came we need a better way to input the data for people to manage it. And I asked, like, can
Sure.
I, through this showcase using a Power App, can I just put some demo together, a proof of concept where people can manage it?
I feel like
And
Power App has the opportunity to get a lot of spin-offs in there.
yes, no, a ton, especially honestly, especially working with a lot of reports. It's a perfect road. But it's like, can you give me a few hours or a few time to put something together that will be kind of crude, but just to show what it can do rather than buying something just because we know we're struggling with this report. We know we're struggling with the data in here. They said, okay. So the spinoff was an origin off the report. And basically, we put a demo together for the stakeholders, saying, "Okay, if you are a product manager, here's what you do. If you're the marketing manager, here's what you do in this app." They said, "We really like this," and we actually paused the report or paused how we're going to gather the data to build the app because we're like, we want to change our process to this Power App. We want to basically integrate everything, and it was a great example of, hey, we know that we're not going to get the ideal solution from this report or from just gathering the data now. It's not the best, but basically allowing the time to show a very crude proof of concept actually allowed us to change the process overall. It did change the timeline.
Yep.
It did change even change the original goal. But I think throughout the whole process, it realized what is our end goal anyways? It wasn't just the report. It really was to have a better way to
Defining the process.
Exactly.
Can I ask a couple clarifying questions about like why you're doing what you're doing here? Just to make sure I understand kind of my headspace. So what was before the Power App was introduced, what was your original design for source of data?
It was gather all the data from where all the product information is coming from: Excel, SQL database. Yeah, an API.
The variety of sources, but it all kind of lived wherever it needed to live.
Right.
And the reason I'm asking this question is I'm kind of leading the witness here a little bit because I've had a lot of experiences.
I see where you're going.
You see where I'm going with this one potentially? I don't like Excel as a data source, honestly. I mean, it's cool that you can use it, very neat, but it's, to me, the input mechanism of Excel is too flexible for what users can do and potentially has very high risks for breaking my reports downstream. Anytime I've built a data process on top of Excel files, it's just rife with errors and challenges. And I do a lot more work in the data engineering Power Query space to fix and clean things, much more than I think I should. And so I like where you went with this project, Tommy, because you kind of had a goal of like, hey, we're going to deliver the output of this product data. That's the goal of the main project. And what you found, I think, in that was you found some inherent weaknesses in your process and was able to add a side project.
There are going to be limitations no matter what we do.
Correct. And by bringing in something else, it informed a better process. And I think it was actually really good. I like the way you put this is we were building a report, but what we were really building was a better process. And I think sometimes, that delivery deployment level or where you're at and how you can focus and consolidate things. I think that this is a good example.
I do want to make a note, though. There are sometimes this was a desperation one because of it's not just Excel, to your point. It's usually because, they have this idea of what they want, but because of each data source and different people managing it, there's no relation. There's no way we can relate things together. So we're never going to deliver what they're expecting. They're expecting this prediction model or whatever they're expecting, but each source someone manages differently. So there's no way to connect it. So for the user, they don't understand that, okay, we're going to be severely limited and not deliver what they expect because to kind of the point, everyone has their own ownership and their own process. So this was more out of desperation, not out of, let's just try something new, if that makes sense.
I'm going to I understand I don't want to like counter your point there. I agree. But what I would say is in that situation, I feel like when I encounter things like that, it speaks to a lack of data culture that doesn't have the ability to correctly identify you are data stewards of this kind of information. And I will say this. I've been in organizations where master data is very important to like defining what products we build, how we build things, all that kind of fun stuff. However, when we did it, it was very challenging for people to like get their head around like how do we actually build this in a way that is actually sustainable. And getting a lot of people on board to owning portions of their data, especially in master data, is I think really hard. And that's why really expensive tools exist to put owners to different columns of data about products. So I don't think, yes, I think I see your observation there, but I also would say like this is also probably what you're also probably experiencing here as well is inside the company, the culture there was too many people, so many cooks in the kitchen, and there wasn't clearly defined ownership roles of the master data. And I find that that's actually very common, believe it or not.
Very common. The last thing I'll say to this, but at least allowing us to do the proof of concept, to do the spinoff, is one of the big differences. Because you're going to find all the time the complications or different management. But we propose as the BI team, can we do something that may take longer, that may not be exactly right now what you expect, but just to showcase a better long-term picture here. And that to me was, if you want to talk about maybe not necessarily data culture, but just a good culture, this was a huge proponent for us to say, okay, I know you want this now, you want this in the next month or whatever the ETA was, but you're not going to get what you want. Allow us to do something, even if it's a proof of concept, and spend some time dabbling in this and see what you think. That was the catalyst to really, honestly, the whole organization adopting Power Apps for moving forward too.
Nice.
Yeah.
Seth, any examples from your side of where you kind of saw a main project, and maybe did you have any examples of like where you said no to some side projects because it just wasn't fitting the main goal of direction?
No, I think an example that fits well in here is actually one that's ongoing, because a lot of what this article series is about is the development or the raw question, right? Like the ideas generator. Like there's no clear idea of where we want to go.
Yeah.
So I was trying to look up quick what episode we spent talking about creativity, which actually led to me implementing like monthly meetings in my team, which are more brainstorming, creative meetings, like solving problems.
Yeah.
And the byproduct of that, I think, is a really good example of a spin-off project, right? So you have a main project or a deliverable, and for the business, what one of those was driving usage and adoption, right? So the main goal, obviously, is to produce for the business the insights that they would need to start making decisions about what customers are we going to go interact with, what drivers or campaigns can we generate, et cetera.
Sure.
So the project itself is, a lot of showing the obvious relationships, making sure that the business has access to those. We're removing the roadblocks essentially for good decision making, and obviously putting some of those insights together that may not have been there before.
Sure.
Where the kind of spin-off project comes in was taking this idea, right, and running it through our creative, brainstorming meeting and saying like, hey, like this is a major objective throughout our organization, but we have access to a lot of different data points, across our ecosystem that this team is aware of. Are there other things that, we're overlooking or that could enhance the output of what we're trying to do here? And the results of that were actually like really valuable. And maybe we should do a follow-up on that podcast as far as kind of an approach that I've found in taking those creative meetings and making them valuable to the business.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, you take these and you're going to have a spectrum of ideas. Ones that maybe like it's almost on that quadrant of how long is it going to take? What is the level of effort versus, it's either really long, really high, or really low, really short, or also impact to the business, right? And what you're looking for are the ideas that are high impact, low effort. And those are the ones that you can immediately introduce. So out of there came a whole bunch of like identifying multiple different areas of the business where there could be very useful data points for us to do, just refinement and categorization of data to link up to our main data sets, or do some text matching, or leverage other sources and introduce that enhanced data to drive different types of insights or different opportunities for the business to go drive usage and adoption. So while we have the main project going, I think this is one of those examples that fits squarely into the use case here that she's talking about, where they aren't blockers in the sense that we're producing the value to the business. But if we are able to complete those enhancements in these spin-off projects, like, the potential impact to the overall deliverable could be much greater than just what was outlined initially. And I think that's what, as you read through the article, she's defining in the several spin-off projects that they did incur here. One of those being a lot deeper level of survey and detailed analysis, which produced more in-depth insights that they were able to leverage. And then she also outlines one where they did a categorization of titles, right? Almost. And somebody who's doing a thesis spent an inordinate amount of time, like 500 hours, right?
Mhm.
Like automating, like how to group the titles together. And I think one of the examples they use is, many different levels of an organization, whether you were an individual contributor, a manager, a VP, they may say that they're an analyst, right? But the VP salary would skew things wildly. And, like, are you a leader? Are you not a leader? People who weren't really leaders were saying they were leaders. And the leader, what they defined as leaders was at a certain level or higher. So there was a lot of ambiguity, and what they were expecting to find in that aspect of things wasn't as clean as they wanted it to. And that side project really enhanced the overall after the fact, though. And I think what is key in understanding, I guess, her point is these side projects have different timelines, because one of these completed and enhanced the main project.
Yep.
But the other completed 6 months after, so they couldn't use it. However, there's kind of a retro secondary where it's it still was able to be incorporated after the fact.
Seth
That's a
is
good
making
point too.
Great point here, because the example I gave
He only makes great points, just FYI.
only makes great points. I know. Without being said, yeah, without mine, well, maybe more.
Seth almost did a spit take on his coffee on that one. That was good. He would spit his coffee all over the microphone. That would have been great.
We only give accolades to Seth.
Would have smelled like coffee. Yeah.
But the big part, I think, was Seth is saying that really is the heart of a spinoff project is you may not know the value going into it, or if it even comes with an outcome of true value. Part of the definition of a spinoff project is that research and development is I'm going to dabble. I can't necessarily prove the value, whatever the outcome may be, because you're kind of experimenting. You're doing a little, and that's kind of the sake of a spinoff project.
Is it though? I think I don't know if I agree with that, because
I'm struggling with that comment as well.
I think in the spectrum, especially as it's defined in the article, right? We're coming down to the focus point of moving into delivery, build and delivery, right? At that point, I've done my POC. I know what value props are going to come out of the main.
I agree with that.
Even in my example, I know there's value. I just don't know what the impact of that yet is, because there's analysis that has to happen. But I know there's value that's going to enhance the thing, as opposed to what if we did. And I think that's part of the incubator of ideas that starts to filter down and say, okay, based on our POCs, we know within a certain boundary that this is going to be a big enhancement to the main thing. We just can't carve it off, or we need to, do this as a spinoff. So I would say it's a little further downstream.
I'm going to draw on my knowledge here around app development. I feel like this happens a lot in app development, in my opinion, because there's always, and sometimes you don't know what you don't know. and you don't get to really experience an application until you're actually in it and you build something, your initial vision, and then you kind of as you're building it, you're like, there's additional, like, whoa, if we added a button that did this, that would make this whole step a lot easier. Or, if I, again, depends on how you think about how you build apps. Like if I added this new feature, like for example, I'll give you an example of the theme generator, because that's one tool that we've been building, right? We have a theme generator, and I have this really interesting idea of like, hey, let's create all these scrims, these background images that we're going to just land on the page. Cool. And then I was like, as we're building that feature, I'm thinking to myself, wouldn't it be really nice if the theme generator could just detect where to put the visuals for you? That would be a neat feature. So that kind of like in lieu of building the wireframing portion of the theme generator, there was this whole idea around like, what if I just clicked a button and it just said, I'm going to just detect different shades of color on the image, and then where those images appear, flip in, here's some squares that I'm just going to apply to the page in a, where I think they best need to fit. And you can always modify them after the fact, but the idea is making that easier so I don't have to spend the time going through the images themselves and actually trying to place every single visual. Like it should be smart enough to figure. So that was a feature that was kind of added after the fact. It was like as I was building the actual feature, and I think this is where I think you struggle though. So the idea may have been good. The timing of when that idea can be delivered, we definitely didn't release all of it at once, right? We first said, okay, let's shelf that idea. Let's come back to it. Let's finish the wireframing experience first. And then we came back and we added this whole kind of AI for, visual building and dropping visuals on the page. So I think that's another good example of, how we saw the idea as we were developing, seemed like a good idea, kind of tabled it, and then came back and spent some time developing out the feature and like actually adding it. So I feel like good software development should be doing things like that, right? You have a main objective you're trying to build. You try to plan as much as you can up front, but throughout the project, you always find there are tweaks and adjustments. And I think potentially this is why you want to use sprint and agile methods, because sometimes the final goalpost may slightly adjust itself based on side work that needs to come along for the ride to get the final project done.
So what are the origins then of leading to a spin-off project? Because what I'm hearing so far from the conversation, it was a question like, what if this occurred, or what if this happened during the project? But in my head, it's usually more than that. It's usually allowing time for some creativity to a point, because if you are doing the sprint and agile, if you are, hey, heads down, we are going to work to this goal, that doesn't really lead to a lot of opportunity for, let's ask other questions about this. And, can we, what if I tested this? Because I have too many deliverables on a set date. So I guess the question I'm asking is, what's the origin of the origin of a spin-off project? And then how do we allow them to really prosper, or in a sense, become something that we're going to work on?
I'm going to give maybe a weird answer here. So if you think about where you're at in the process, right? We're at this kind of you are here phase, right? We've done our exploration. We've had a whole bunch of idea expansions. We're now focusing and consolidating down to what we need to build, right? We're at the point in time where we're saying we're going to focus on building and producing something. If we let that timeline between what we want to build and produce and deliver and deploy extend too far, I think you risk that area of you're risking maximum exhaustion as you add all these little tasks to everything. At some point, you can get to a place where nothing's ever getting done. And at some point, people, particularly when we're on report building, right? RBI is supposed to be fast. It's supposed to be a quick way to build reports. If we take too long to deliver some kind of report to the business, they're like, what are you doing? What's taking so long? Well, in the early days of Power BI, when there was a whole bunch of new visual features that were coming out, it was very challenging to not get distracted and being like, wow, this new feature just came out. I can incorporate these spark lines inside a matrix. Let's do that. Hey, I can do all these. I can group visuals now. Let's group everything in the report. Let's just do all the grouping. Like you saw all these features show up, and you're trying to build a report and get to a point where we have a delivery of a report, but all these new things kept coming out. And you're like, oh, I should try this. Oh, we need if I can do that. And you keep adding all these things, and you have to really be conservative in making sure that you don't exhaust yourself with all the things you're trying to maintain. Because at some point, you have to really focus in and say, what can we get out the door? And so my opinion here is, to your point, Tommy, like, how do you gauge this? What's too much? When are too many side projects, right? I think unless you have a clear definition of what done looks like, you will get yourself in trouble with too many side projects. And that will increase the the amount of build you need to do to get something out the door.
Absolutely.
So my opinion is I try and define a very clean. So I would prefer, in my opinion here, is I would prefer to deliver something early, keeping scope as small as possible. And then if I have extra hours or extra time that I'm ahead of schedule, then I'll add a little bit more exploration. But that's more of like a single developer kind of experience.
Yeah.
I'm probably not slowing our main development down because of, ideas that I have. And I'll pause here for a second. I also think this article is talking about people and teams of things working on getting stuff done. I also believe a lot of report building is very solo based. So this is a little bit different when we're talking about solo based development, because because of the way Power BI tool is built, it's not very easy for multiple people to work on report page building together. Mm-hmm. You can kind of break the workloads by, here's the data modeler and here's the report builder. So we could have a team of people doing modeling to some degree because there's data engineering behind that. So data engineers, modeling, and then you have like the person that's doing the report development.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great point, because we maybe as BI developers, we don't have spin-off projects as much as spin-off tasks. And I'm thinking of a linear timeline of there's spin-off, and on the same timeline, there's rabbit holes. And I think they're very correlated, where you say, oh, we're just going to spin off. You know what, Mike, great point with all the new visual features coming out, like, oh, drill through. Oh, you know what we could do here. And that I think could be considered spin off, because again, it's also a little more gray with the report development, but it can lead to some devastating rabbit holes where you're like, we've added too much here. But I'll backtrack a bit on the individual role here, where you may have your task or your deliverables. We're going to build a report, which again, it's not necessarily you're building a UI with these features. You have a lot more gray area to have spinoff. So I think it's a little more challenging for us as building reports or putting together a data model, where it can be a little static, because you're like, hey, we just need to have these facts, these dimensions. You could obviously expand it, but once you get into the report and the visual side of things, as one person working on this, if you don't have a soundboard, you can start getting a lot of tentacles, a lot of roots or branches in different areas. A spin-off that may not lead to a lot of impact.
But I think that's the wrong place for applying spin-off. Like, that's not a spin-off project to me. Like, if you go back to, and I found it, if you go back to our episode 286, where John Cleese had the video and we were reviewing a lot of the things that he was talking about, the main drivers behind that are the mode of thinking, right? And what you're describing or trying to shoehorn in spin-off projects into is delivery and execution mode.
Closed mode.
Right? Like closed mode thinking, right? The vast majority of our time as individuals building things for the business is in closed mode thinking.
I agree.
We're delivering, right? Somebody else came up with the idea. Someone else has the need, right? They're defining these things. Now, am I saying that you can't be creative in your solutions? No, absolutely not. Like, you've many different paths. Like, hey, I'm going to implement. Do I make a decision point between adding a week or throwing that into tech debt? To me, that's not a spin-off project, right? That's a decision of the architecture I'm making to deliver something in as quickly as I can. Am I choosing certain visualizations? Am I, like, all of that, I think, is part of execution. Spin-off projects, to me, are part of the creative process. And that's specifically why I created a space for the team to start thinking about objectives, future objectives, right? Or projects in that creative mode, because it's the idea generator. It's the ideation. It's like, hey, if like there are no constraints, think about our systems. What do we do? Like blah, blah, blah. And that's where you get into, I think, identifying spin-off projects, right? Like if you look at her examples of creating this main project of career, what is a career? Could they have done it without the spinoff project? Yes. It's more valuable because of them, though, right? And you're not going to get there I think in that closed mode thinking where like there isn't enough time typically in projects to do this all over the place. Like what I would argue is there retroactively after you've already delivered on the project? Probably, right? Like the most about something. Could you spin off a project or enhance it? I think there's a natural evolution there rather than it being everything has to come from nothing and we're going to create all these ideas and then we're going to create the project and spin off projects. No, I don't think it all has to come that way. I think as you're learning things and as you're engaging with the data, figuring out the data sets, implementing something for the business, that there's another opportunity on the outcome, or you might have some ideas that go off in that direction. But I think that's after you complete the project where then you fully bake those or fully give those the attention of how could we make this better? Or how could I, give a V2 to this business user and blow their socks off? Because I think you get into the sticky point that you're talking about where it's like you're trying to interject these ideas into closed mode execution thinking. And I don't think it belongs there because you're already in the path of I'm estimating these things. It's going to take me X amount of time. I'm time bound. I'm executing, right? Versus, are you really part of the creative process? Are you developing the story or are you just executing on it? If you're just executing on it, like I think we're past that point. If you're the builder of them, maybe there's opportunity before you start. But I do think the delineation, at least in my mind, is that separation, because when I'm in execute mode, like it's implementation with a little creativity. It's not spinning off projects out of the same one typically.
Yeah. And I know we mentioned this earlier, but I want to see if you agree with this or not. I feel strongly if you are then in that open mode, and if a spinoff project may be coming from that, it's very hard to gauge the overall impact or the value of that, and that's okay from a spin-off project because it may sound like a good idea, it may sound like interesting, but I don't think at that time you should try to gauge, okay, what value or impact will this have on the business? Because that's kind of the heart of open source being open mode. Honor each contribution. No idea at that point necessarily is a bad idea. That doesn't mean that you allow full access and full work on whatever comes from a spin-off project, but there also has to be that idea of this may work, this may not work, but let's give it a shot. And I think that's, to me, something that I feel strongly about any spin-off project is if you feel, no,
I think you're talking two different things again, because like even in her examples, they know there's value to those projects. You're down focused to executing on your main thing. They did a little exploration, a little POC analysis that gave them enough information to know that more work would need to be done, and they're not going to have it, right? Because they have a timeline on the main project, or they know there's value there. They just they're not getting it. So it required more refinement and more work to go get it done. So they collaborated with others with an expectation that there was going to be value there because it was part of the main thing. So what I'm describing to you is like those are the POCs that help you figure out what are the value props for main or spinoff. I don't think those are the same.
Yeah, let me articulate another example here potentially of where we're going with things that might make sense here in this context. And again, they're talking about like this data research project kind of around career and visualization and other things as well. One thing I think I'm also gleaning from your comments here, Seth, is that this is not just a one-person show, right? I'm thinking very linearly, typically. I think most of what I build in Power BI realm, it's kind of a one-man show of what's going on, like a one-person show, right? It's kind of like we're building the model, and then we're building a report, and then we're kind of moving on. There's not a lot of interplay between other teams. If I had to get an example around, let's imagine we're doing something where we're trying to produce some financial reporting for the organization. We may be spending some time to build those tables and groom data initially. There may be an opportunity for you in that project, like another good side project that could be done at the same time is you now can add someone else to the workload and say, look, I'm building this model. The model's close to being complete. I'm not sure. Maybe I don't have all the measures. Maybe I don't have everything done. But hey, Mr. Business Unit, this is the model we're going to give you. Can you utilize this? And so at the same time, you're kind of splitting the workload between one person and now two people. And now you can have someone who's completing the financial report that we need for C-level people or whatever. And now there's someone else in finance who's also digging into the, the data model that has the finance data in it. And now they're producing their own stuff. So to me, that feels a lot more like, let's think about parallel works that potentially can happen at the same time. And I think where I'm getting hung up here is I keep thinking of the mentality, and this is just how I think, right? I keep thinking about one model, one report, one person. It's kind of one person's work stream. And I think really what we're talking about here is this is identifying where multiple people can come together and kind of collaboratively work together on stuff. So, great will be the day when we have the ability to build reports collaboratively at the same time, right? We can do that now with having multiple thin reports on top of a data model, but we can't be in the same report at the same time working together. That experience does not exist. So I would really like to see an experience at some point where we could have more team members kind of, working together on the same artifact. And yes, I think how you design your system is very important to enable this. Because if you're thinking a combined model and thin report into one PBIX file, I think you very much have limited what you potentially could build in your team. If you start thinking in models and thin reports, now you have two artifacts, and now you're able to divide the workload a lot more. So I really do think there's some system design here that enables more creativity and potentially enables more people to work on the same stuff, especially when you have larger projects to get accomplished.
Another example. I thought I got the nod. Go ahead, continue.
I think I did both at the same time, so you're good.
No, to your point, Mike, another area that resonates in spin-off project realm, for a point when you're doing POC or discovery, right? Like around, hey, we're consolidating a bunch of data sets, right? From third-party systems. We're going to start designing this thing. We're doing data discovery.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, that's a good point. Hey, I'm going to load the data anyways. Check out this data.
One of the points she makes, though, is collaboration. These spin-off projects require your time, your help, right?
Yes.
Yep. A great one that comes to mind is it's kind of like you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, right? Yep. Hey, in our data discovery, and this is what they did too. They did data discovery, realized enhancements of the data would make their overall project better. We recognize folks, subject matter experts, business users, right? Power BI champions. When we're integrating and we're trying to pull this data together, we got some really bad data. What if we spin up a project to clean up this data, right? I can help you identify all of the particular areas in the buckets and et cetera, of the things that need cleanup. That's going to create a better system for you guys. And then selfishly, this spinoff project is going to build better reports for me, right? I don't have to build all the artifacts on the very front end to recategorize or rebucket or do all the things where the business expects to view data this way. We're fixing it in the core system and not in our data models, which is problematic in and of itself. The more business logic we bury in our processes, right?
The harder it
becomes.
becomes.
We don't know it's there, but I think that would resonate to me as a great spinoff, right? Value to value, and then overall value to my main project.
And I think, I think that my kind of last point here, as we get near time, unfortunately, is a little twofold. I think one, there's a big distinction, Seth, and I think where you and I were one step around each other was there's a big difference between experimentation and actually having a spinoff project, beginning to tinker and actually going through with a spinoff project. And I think, going off Mike's point where, everything's been more solo when it comes to Power BI, but man, I think we're going to see some great examples as we step into Fabric of allowing for better spinoff projects because of the framework that Fabric has too, where it's not going to be just an individual putting together the whole system of I have my data, my semantic model, I have my report, and that's kind of just been me. And that's kind of been my own experience, especially now in the world that I'm in from the consultant point of view. But for a lot of teams, and I think introducing Fabric into that, where we have the lake house, those examples or those situations of potential, hey, the data is looking like this. What if we actually started experimenting getting the data this way? Or what if we actually added another way to clean the data throughout the process? Allowing other teams and other people is kind of, I think, what Fabric is going to be one of the unintended consequences in a positive way that Fabric's going to allow. And I think, I think spin-off projects, to kind of sum it up, is it kind of does require almost more than one person. It does require a collaboration aspect. Otherwise, it's just more experimentation.
I think that was an aha moment that you said there, Seth. That thing kind of really picked on my memory here on this topic particularly. Is we're talking about more than one person in this kind of process, and we're not talking about solo development.
And I think final thoughts, like from my perspective, the best spin-off projects are going to come with three things. One is they're going to be the most valuable when someone is thinking ahead or in a larger scope of the value to the business. They require, I think, creative ideation, with whether that's in the development of the idea itself or project, to think outside the box, to identify areas of opportunity, and then collaboration with shared workloads, right? Like ultimately, we're trying to get more value with less effort, right? But if you find there's areas where value is driven on both sides, and you're offering up your assistance as well in this engagement, these are the most successful ones that are outlined, and I think some really good points in the article.
I agree with that as well. I don't really have any other final steps. Final thoughts here, other than great article. Definitely go read it. I think we've talked about a lot of good aspects of this whole thing. With that, we just want to kind of wrap here and say we do appreciate your ears for an hour. We hope this was kind of an enlightening discussion, a little bit less around the technical side, but a little bit more focusing on the software and skills and the process side of things, and where you can potentially apply this. As I'm wrapping up here, I'm thinking my only final thought, I guess I am reformulating my final thought here. My final thought could be around the architecture you pick will decide whether or not you can utilize this collaborative approach or not. If you're building everything in a single model with the thin report already added, you might be limiting yourself. But if you build in a more flexible way, that might help you explore and give out information to other team members so they can build what they want to build. All right. If you like this, please, we'd love it if you would share it with somebody else. This is the only way we communicate to other people who haven't heard about the podcast. You are our eyes and ears and mouths. I don't know. You are the voice that lets other people hear about this. If someone else doesn't know about it, they don't know about it, they'll never hear about it. So please go out to somebody else, let them know you like the podcast. Maybe you found some insights, and we'd love it if you'd share it either on social medias or talk to people at work. Actually talk to people in person, with words. That'd be great. Tommy, where else can we find the podcast, Tommy?
We'll try to keep it. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to subscribe and leave a rating. It helps us out a ton. If you have a question, an idea, or a topic that you want us to talk about in a future episode, head over to powerbi.tips and leave your name and a great question. Finally, join us live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central, and join the conversation on all of Power BI Tips social media channels.
And maybe we'll see you at an event live someplace, sometime, somewhere. Anyways, thank you all very much. We appreciate you listening. We'll see you next time.